So, Dr. McClelland, how did these events change your life?
They didn't change my life at all. I mean, I'm not being, not discounting the importance of that, but I did what I do, And even though he was a president, people ask you, well, what were you thinking? You don't think. You just go into a reactive mode. You don't think I'm working on the president or whoever. You're working on a wounded person. And you don't have time to think, as you well know.
Right.
And you just start doing that. But it hasn't, changed my life or anything. I'm not saying I'm not very cognizant of the importance of that, but it didn't make me go one direction where I've been going in another direction.
From what you described, he got superb care that he couldn't have gotten
Nothing
anywhere
could be done.
else in the world because he came to this incredible hospital.
These were absolutely fatal wounds that he had.
Right.
Nobody ever.
Today,
have done it.
nothing
It's
ever
just the
could be
same.
changed.
Just the same, because the back half of his right cerebral hemisphere was gone. The right half of his cerebellum was gone.
What was the level of communication then between you all as the physicians and then when the autopsy was done in Bethesda? Did you all speak?
Dr. Perry and I had an office together at that time, and the following Saturday morning, about 10 o'clock or so, we were sitting in our office, again, kind of, going over what had happened, and the phone rang, and Dr. Perry answered it, and he was talking to Dr. Boswell, who was one of the autopsy pathologists who had just completed the autopsy, and he was asking Dr. Perry some questions about what we had seen and done here. I couldn't hear the exact things he was saying, of course, but from Dr. Perry's responses, I sort of knew what questions Dr. Boswell had asked Dr. Perry. And so the thing that had caused some confusion was this wound in the neck and whether it was an entrance or an exit wound. And of course, when we saw the president, we had no knowledge of what went on in Dealey Plaza.
Right.
And Dr. Perry, when he saw it, and this is what he basically told Dr. Boswell, that he thought it was an entrance wound from the size of the hole. And of course, he initially had not seen the wound in the back of the president's head. And he told, in fact, all the newsmen gathered upstairs at Parkland right after the assassination, right after the president died. Dr. Perry and Dr. Clark were interviewed by probably 50 or 60 newsmen up there in the where we usually had grand rounds in Parkland. And Dr. Perry said apparently this was an entrance wound
Into the neck.
into the neck. And of course, as it turns out, it may have been, I say may because we still don't really know, from a bullet that went in through his back, almost whether it was near the junction of the neck and the back or lower, that's an uncertainty. But in fact, Dr. Boswell asked Dr. Perry, did we turn the president over and see that there was a bullet wound in the back? And Dr. Perry said, no, we didn't get a chance to turn him over because how rapidly everything transpired. We immediately started working on the wound in the neck, and then when he died, we felt it was inappropriate for us to do anything else at that time.
And what were the thoughts about the gunshot wound in the back of the head that
they
you
didn't
vividly
say
saw?
much, as I recall, in that conversation about that. All I can say about that from my own personal standpoint of having stood above that wound from about an 18-inch distance where I could see exactly where it was and what the inside of the skull looked like, I didn't really know what's our thinking at that time. We thought there was some bizarre course of the bullet that may have gone in the neck and then come out the back of the head, which was really not likely at all.
Right.
But my thoughts about that formed up when I first saw the Zapruder film, which was a number of years later before Geraldo Rivera got a copy of it somewhere in the late 60s or early 70s and showed it to the public for the first time. And I came home one night just as that was about to be shown, and my wife called me in to look at this that they're about to show. And I sat down, and they showed the film of the Zapruder film of the whole shooting in both regular speed and slow motion speed. Well, when I sat and looked at that, I thought, oh, this wound, you can see the president come down off of Houston Street onto Elm Street.
Right.
And as they turn into Elm Street, you see his hands go up to his neck like that.
Right.
So I immediately thought, that's were the reaction to that wound we saw. And then they drive on down very slowly toward the triple underpass, and they disappear behind a sign that was the edge of elms at that time. It's gone now. But they disappeared behind that sign, and maybe 2 or 3 seconds later, as they came out on the Zapruder film, he's still holding his hands up to his neck. So there's a definite different shot. Not one shot
Right.
caused all of these things. And as he comes out from behind that sign, Mrs. Kennedy has realized that something has happened when he's holding it, and she leans over to him as if to say, "What's wrong?"
What's wrong?
And then all of a sudden his head literally explodes, and he's thrown violently backward and to the left. And I thought, the way that bullet looked, that bullet came from the grassy knoll and the picket fence. And that's where that bullet came from. Probably hit somewhere along the hairline, tangentially went across the skull and out the back, low in the back of the skull.
Yeah. So that would be in contrast to what the final Warren report is. You've, I'm sure, read,
Yes.
which espoused the single bullet theory of going both into into the president's head and then coming out in front and then going into Governor Connolly.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. How did you feel about the Warren report's final report and summary?
Well, of course, that's kind of colored now by my knowing what happened after that the House Special Select Assassinations Committee came up with a totally different view of what happened.
Tell us about that. Yeah.
Did not agree with that. Well, as you say, there was a single bullet theory, at least in regard to that bullet that hit the president, also causing Connolly's wounds, which was very unlikely.
Right.
on
And
surface.
Connolly denied being shot
That's
at the
right.
same time.
That's right. He said that was not his.
Not-
Well, then in 1976, because probably at least 3/4 of the nation didn't believe this was not a conspiracy, that there were more than one gunman, which automatically meant there was a conspiracy. And so what they decided, after studying this for 3 years, from 1976 to 1979, that House Special Select Committee concluded that in all probability, that's why the way they stated, there was a conspiracy. However, they also stated that we're not at liberty to release all the details of that until 2029, which struck, I think, all of us as, why is that? Why can't you release those details? But that's still the nature of that at the moment, to my knowledge.